Outside the Book continues. I'm Barbara Deeb, coming to you from the Carol Nicely Center in Bowling Green. We're honored now to have with us author Jamie Ford. Jamie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we were talking beforehand. You've received a lot of accolades. In particular, the something that kind of singles you out as a Chinese American. And I asked you how that influences your work and what you plan to do.
You know, I'm half Chinese on my dad's side, and I really have one foot in two different cultures and two different worlds. And I try to explore both sides. I mean, truly. I received an award from an Asian American literary group. I sit on the board of an Asian museum. But my mom was born in the Ozarks in Arkansas, little town of Marshall. And so I do come from two different cultural backgrounds, and both are equally interesting to me. So I'll probably explore her story as well.
Now, the name Ford is your name. That's,
It
it's
is.
the family name, but you mentioned you have a lot of relatives with more Chinese sounding names.
Yeah, my great-grandfather was a man named Min Chung, and he came over to this country around 1860 when he was 13 years old, and about 30 years later he changed his last name to Ford. I always say that's like someone coming here from Pakistan and changing their name to Chuck Norris. You know, it's like a red-blooded American name. And so I do have family. You know, my grandmother's maiden name was Chu, and I have all these. My dad spoke Cantonese fluently. The name Ford is interesting because people always assume that my mother was Asian.
Right.
But it goes back 4 generations, much farther.
But I bring that up because you were talking about the fact that your publisher at one point considered maybe
Yes.
having you use a Chinese.
Yeah.
name.
One publisher, they thought perhaps I would want a Chinese pen name, a pseudonym. And it might have made more sense. I understand their thinking because it's complicated to write about Asian American things, and my last name is Ford. But it makes for an interesting story. I get to explain my grandfather. I get to explain his connection to history of that pioneer era, and it's who I am. And it also doesn't box me in if I want to write apocalyptic zombie fiction or something like that. So.
It's who I am, he said.
Yeah.
So is who you are what goes into these books?
I tend to shy away from that and say no, and my wife basically rats me out and says, "Oh yeah, that's him." So they say writers prick their fingers and bleed on the page, and my books are always more of a heart transplant. I definitely put a lot of myself into those characters.
A heart transplant, that's heavy stuff.
It is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, writers, a writer much better than myself said, writers are exorcists of their own demons. And I think there's some aspect of that. I see that in a lot of, I look at Pat Conroy's work, who I love and admire, Pat Conroy, and I see his personal history reflected in all his books. And I think a lot of authors do that.
Becoming a writer, okay? Did you
Yeah.
set out that
As I laugh
one day?
nervously.
Yes. No, I mean, is that something one aspires to do or just happen?
Is that something someone aspires to do? Being a writer is a wonderful and odious profession. It's beautiful and it's maddening, but it's a great form of art and expression, I think. My degree is in art and design, so I had a whole separate career, but I always wanted to be a writer, just your classic closet novelist, fumbling around with fiction for years. And I started taking it seriously maybe 10 years ago, and that's when things really turned around for me, from going from the amateur to borderline professional, spending a lot of time going to writers' conferences and workshops and festivals just like this, and trying to learn the craft and get better.
Art and design is your background, and your books really do have lovely covers. Do you have any input in the art and design?
I don't want to have any input, but my editor wants me to have input.
Oh, okay.
And so they always ask for my input, and I knock out some things in Photoshop, and I share them, and then they always come back with something infinitely better than anything I suggested. So I'm happy to defer to them. I think they're the experts. And it's kind of like if you're a cook or a chef and someone else prepares a meal for you, that's actually a luxury. So I'm happy to not be an extra cook in the kitchen.
And just keep writing.
Absolutely.
Just keep writing. We've been talking with author Jamie Ford. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.